Hey, it's Ed. Today, I'd like to talk about Logic Pro for iPad once again. I've talked about Logic Pro for iPad and Chord Tracks in a couple of videos. This time I want to approach a slightly different situation, which is, let's say you've got a track that you have from somebody or that you created yourself that doesn't have the chord information in it, and you need to create a chord track so you can use the session players to follow those chords, or you just need the chords for some other reason. How are you going to handle that? Now, there's all sorts of ways you can handle that. You can run it through an app that detects the chords for you. You can use AI apps that detect the chords for you. There's all sorts of tools out there. But I'm going to focus on an approach which is fairly simple and relies a bit on your ears, because I think it's an interesting exercise, and it's probably could be useful for people that are wanting to learn a little bit more about hearing chords and identifying chords by ear, or just learning a little more about, how you start with a track and build it up from nothing yourself without using a tool. Nothing against tools at all, but sometimes it's good to just have that skill within yourself. So let's take a look at this project here. So what I've got is at the top here, you can see there's a chord track here in Logic. Right below that, I've got a loop that is also from Logic, and you can see there's chord track information in this loop. There's also a MIDI loop. This one has chord track information. A pattern loop, that one also. This one, however, this blue sky chord layers, this does not have track information. It's a Apple loop that's included with Logic. However, it's a legacy from the GarageBand package, and it does not have chord track information. The last one here is a audio loop that I created myself with another gentleman, and that does not have audio information either. What I've got here is a project that I've created from an initial loop, and I added a bunch of tracks. Now, I'm going to show you, basically, this is a template that you can use yourself to do the same thing that I did, and I'm going to include a link to it in the description so you can download it yourself. I'm going to explain how it works, but before I do that, I want to show you basically what the end result would be of the process that you're going to start, and to identify the chords and see this chord track up here. You can get this generated yourself. Now, just to give you a quick visual of what your final project might look like using the process I'm going to show here, this is an example where I've got a audio file or a loop that I've brought in. In this case, it's actually had chord information, but I stripped it out, so I cheated a little bit. But in the real example, I will use a loop without that and detect it. At the top here is chord track. Below it, this is the chord track pasted into this track right here. It just brings in block chords. And then below it, I've got 3 session players that have been added. They're going to follow that chord track at the top. So this basically is the most basic version of what you could create. And you could do a lot more than this, but this will give you an idea. So let me play a little bit of this just to show you what you might expect. And to show you what it started off as, let's listen to this. All right, so you get the idea. All right, now I've actually loaded up a track here that I've brought in, these blue sky chord layers. These don't blue skies chord layers. This track does not have chord information in it. And the chords that you see above here are ones that I actually generated myself by listening to the track and finding chords that matched. And then below this, what you see is I'm calling it a chord detection track. Basically, it's when I was trying to detect the chords, I recorded the actual chords on the keyboard with a little help from the Chord Trigger app, which you'll see down here. I'll show you a little bit later. In a couple of cases, and then verified that I had the correct chords that went with this sound. So if I play this one now, you'll hear what that sounds like without the session players or anything else. This is just like the basic level with just getting the chords down. So let's play a little bit of that. All right, now that doesn't sound like anything good, but I think you'll notice that the chords that are playing are at least fairly in line with the audio track itself. And that's the goal here to get started. We just want to get that chord track to have chords that are going to be compatible with the audio that's playing. And then you can certainly tweak it after that, but this will get you off the ground started with some basic triads. So let's go to the next step. Let's jump out of here and go to the track. All right, let's take a look at this template that I've created for our project here. This template has 6 tracks. I've imported the audio file or loop, whatever that is that you're going to start with that doesn't have the chord track information. That's in slot number 2 right here. Slot number 1 at the top is where we're going to put our chords for detection. We're going to manually put in some chords down in these other tracks down here, and we're going to pop them in up here along the way, and then we're going to use the chord detection feature of Logic Pro to identify those chords and get it generated into an actual chord track up here along the top. Now, let me jump in. We've got a couple tracks that are fairly closely related, number 3 and number 4. Now, it's called Chord Trigger MAG, that's for major. I got Chord Trigger MIN, that's for minor. Basically, what these 2 tracks are going to do is allow us to press a single key on the keyboard and generate a major chord or a minor chord. This number 5 is a manual, basically, meaning we're going to generate it from the keyboard with our fingers. We can do like a whole chord by pressing down all the keys together. So basically, these are just helper tracks. They're going to help us get some MIDI information into these tracks that identify the chords, and then we're going to pop them up here and then use the identifier. And down at the very bottom, this is just a track that I may or may not use to validate the chords and how they compare against with the track itself, because the inputting these MIDI chords gets a little bit messy. So let's take a look at the settings on the major, and I'll just use that as an example. So let me click on that one here. You'll notice when I click there, if I go down to the inspector right here, you'll notice I've got a MIDI effects loaded called Chord Trigger. Let me maximize that. And there's a number of presets in here. If you go in and do show presets, you'll find a number of presets in there of all varieties. I'm not going to go into it here. One of them, however, happens to be major, and another is minor. So basically what this means is if I go here down to the keyboard below and I press on the F key, it's going to generate an F major chord. If I press on the G, going to be a G major, A major, and so on and so forth. Same thing for the minor. So what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to help a little bit if you're not the kind of person that's great at the keys or creating chords. All you need is one finger to generate that chord, and you'll know exactly what it is, and you can find it pretty fast. If you're a little more skilled, then you can go down here to this number 5 section and manually type in that chord. So if I were to do that on this one, if I want to do, say, an F major, F, A, C, there's my F major chord. There's my C major. I have a little trouble hitting the keys there on the screen. That's a C major chord. And so you can enter the chords manually. But basically the goal here, in either case, is to get a MIDI track with that chord information and notes in a MIDI track down below. And that's what we're going to do. So let's kick it off. Let's take a quick listen to some of the track here so we can determine what these chords might be and where we need to break it up. Okay, so I hear, looks like, I think this first section, let me see if I can slide the cycle along here, along the top. If I just play this now, sounds like there's 2 different chords there, right? So we're going to cut that back to about there. All right, now it happens to be in a half a division of a measure. It doesn't really matter. You can cut this any way you want. You can break these chords up and align them to anything you want along your audio track. It's helpful if it lines up with measures. for the chord changes, but it doesn't have to. It's just going to be easier that way, but it'll work. So in this case, we're lucky. We got a chord on the first half measure, another chord on the second half of measure there. So what is that first chord? And that's what we need to figure out, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, we can go, as I said, we can go to the major. And basically, you could do more of these. You could have major, you could have minor, you could have a sus4, you could have seventh. You can do as many of these tracks as you want. I've only got major and minor in here because this is just a starting point for this process, and I don't want to make it too complicated, but you could certainly add your own and go from there. So let's spin this up. It's going to get a little repetitive, but let's listen to that. Now, let's take a listen and see. It sounds like it might be major to me. Let's see if we can find that chord. But let's start with C. So let me pause for just a second there. The key to determining the right chord is listen for dissonance versus consonance. In other words, does that chord seem to blend or not blend? In other words, does it blend? Yes or no, or more or less? And I would say the C chord does not blend. Let's go to the next one. That definitely does not blend. What about E? Nope. Oh, I think we have a winner. Let's try a couple more just to see. Nope. 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 I'm going to skip the black keys for now because you will encounter the black keys occasionally, but odds are that you're probably more likely to land on a white key and a chord based on a white key than a black key. It's just that it's more common in music to be landing on the white keys, so your chances are better. If you're going to be converting jazz or something a little more advanced, then that's going to be a little more tricky. But with pop songs and things like that, you're pretty safe trying for the white keys and the major chords first, and then the minor chords next. So I think we have established that first section there is an F chord. So what we're going to do is we're going to record that in. And we're going to do that by pressing record right here at the top. And we're going to press F. And you got to be careful because you want to try to hit record while it's looping so that the start of the chord is more or less at the beginning of the loop, because when you go to play it, it's going to be easier that chord detection is going to need to pick it up. And if it's halfway through, it's going to be a little trickier to get that to line up. It's going to take a little bit longer. So the closer you can get to the beginning, the better. But as long as it's in that block somewhere, you can get that chord detection to work. And I'll show that later. So there's our first chord, F. And let's tackle the next one. So let's slide this over here and see what we've got next. So as I said, as we're going to go along here, we're going to take these chords and we're going to slide them up here to the top. There's a reason for that. You should be able to just put these chords one after another on this track or whatever track you're going to use, and just keep going. But Logic likes to overwrite things that are shorter than a measure, and so I've found it's better to just get your chords down here, each section, pop them up into this chord detection track up at the top, and they won't get messed up. So let's go to the next. All right. Could be another major chord. Let's find out. I think it might be G. C is sort of close, but I think G sounds pretty good. So let's try G. Let's record that in. So let's go back, make sure we're highlighted on our track here. We want to record right here, and the record is armed. Let's hit record. All right, notice how it brought the beginning of this track over. It would have wiped out that other one, right? But we can now slide this up here. So now we've got an F and a G, and let's just listen to those real quick. Let's slide that over to the very beginning. There we go. See how it sounds. So far, so good, I think. So now for the next one, let's see what we got in this next section here. Let's slide this over here and slide this over here. All right, this time, let's try the manual process, all right, and see what we can come up with. So let's cycle this, and we're going to just start hitting notes and see what's in and what's out, what blends, what doesn't. C's not bad. D is out. E sounds okay. Not F. G sounds pretty good. A sounds real nice. E sounds nice. So, I think you'll agree. A sounds nice. And A, C, and E sounds pretty nice. All right, so I think we're going to call that good. Now, in this case, I happen to know that's A minor, but you don't have to know what the chord is. You just need to be able to play it. So let's record it in. Even though this is the manual process, all we need to do is record in the 3 notes that make up the chord that blends with that sound. So let's record that in. Let's make sure we've got our correct track armed right here, and hit record. We've got the loop set for the correct section. All right, here we go. Now we just got to time this and try to hit our chord. And hit record. All right, there we go. So now we have 3 chords from our set here. Let's slide this one up to the top alongside the other 2. Just happens to be a different color because it inherited it from the track, but it's fine. So let's now try those 3 together and see how we're doing. I think it's pretty good so far. I think we're doing all right. Now I could continue this process all the way to the end, but I don't think you need to see the whole thing to get the gist of it. So now you could just continue that however long your track is. Now it is a bit of a tedious process, but I would say it's definitely worth it if you're the kind of person that wants to internalize that sort of process of finding the chords that go along with those tracks, that you might want to play it on the keyboard, you might want to hear it in your own head, you might want to just build up that internal frame of reference. It's just a great way to build up your skill set. Now, obviously, you can use AI tools to do it, and that's great. Lots of quicker ways, but this is one way to learn along the way. So let's go to the next stage. All right, let's get our chord detection process started. Let's assume that we don't have just 3 recorded chord sections up here in this track. Let's assume that the whole thing is done. I'd recommend that you do the whole song or large sections of the song, because this procedure will be a lot more efficient if you do it that way. Also, if you don't see a chord track up here when you open your project, you click this little down arrow, click over here, click on there or tap on there and make sure chords is selected. And then you'll see your chord track. And the chord track is actually here. It's just very hard to see. It's very dark right now. It says A minor. There's actually nothing in there. And that's where the chords are going to go. So what we're going to do first is we're going to click that plus sign to add a chord. And it's going to add a chord, but it's going to add a very, very long chord. So I'm going to need to grab the end of that over here and shrink that down, if I can, to the correct size. Right there, half a measure. And you're going to want to do this for the entire section or the entire song. So I'm going to tap on that, hit copy. I'm going to move the playhead to the next position I want to place the chord. Tap in the blank area. I'm going to tap, paste it playhead. Do that again. Tap in the blank area right here. Paste it playhead. Slide this over to the end, and so on and so forth for all the things that you've recorded along this section. And right now what we've got is a bunch of A minors, but what we're going to do is, now that we have the correct chord locations and lengths in place, we can change those chords by chord detection. And I'll show you how to do that next. So, by the way, there's a number of settings that have to be configured in order for this chord detection to work, which I'm going to go into later in the video. But for right now, I just want to show you the chord detection process when that's already in place. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go down, make sure first of all that this chord detection #1 instrument slot is selected right here. We're going to go down to the inspector. We're going to see that it has now popped a chord dialog box. Let's make sure we're on the right chord though, the first one there. That's the one we're going to be operating on. And then we're going to scroll down to where it says use MIDI input. Click on that. Now it says waiting for input, and it is waiting for input from this track right here. And I've got it set up so that the notes in this track are going to be routed through the internal MIDI, and it's going to pick up this input right here and detect the chord based on these notes. So if I go here and carefully put a loop right here, and if I hit play, you'll notice that this changed to an F chord because it detected the notes in this little block as an F major chord, and that's exactly right. And basically this is the process you're going to follow. Next, you're going to create a little loop right here in this A minor section. I'm going to click on the chord, make sure the chord is highlighted before you try to do the detection, because otherwise you're going to wipe out the previous chord. Very easy to do. Once again, click MIDI input. I'm going to go ahead and click play. I don't think it matters where the playhead's at because it's going to start the loop. Yeah, as long as you have that cycle set, the playhead's going to start within that region, and it's going to play the notes within there and then detect based on those. And that's a G, just as it should be. And so basically we're going to continue the same process over and over and over again. We're going to move this cycle over to measure #2. Now we've got our chord selected, we've got our cycle selected. It's going to loop this right here and detect based on these notes. We hit use MIDI input one more time, hit play. All right, and there we go. So you can see it's picked up F, G, and A minor, which is correct. So you would just repeat that process over and over again to the end of the song. And let me cancel out of that and get rid of the inspector window here. And you would end up with a chord track. And that's basically the process you're going to follow. So in the next section, I'm going to show you a completed project with the chord track and how you can work with it from there. All right, so let's take a look at a finished project. This is a fairly short loop, but the chords in it have been fully identified. And let's see what it sounds like real quick, just to verify that the chords are correct. Let's play a little bit. I think so. Anyway, let's now go into where do we go from here? So we've got these helper tracks. I'm just going to leave those. But now that we have a chord track, I'm going to go and I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to tap on that, bring this up. I'm going to say select all and cycle. Actually, I'm going to do select all. Actually, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tap on those once again, and I'm going to say group chords. The chords are now in a group. In order to copy these chords as a set, they have to be grouped together. You can ungroup them at any time and work on them individually. But in this case, what I want to do is copy these out, and I'm going to go down here. This really isn't necessary, but it is kind of interesting to see. Let's paste that in right there. I'm going to go ahead and solo out just the loop and the chords that we have identified. Now, that's assuming this chord detection was all done correctly. It's possible that I made a mistake, so this is the way to find out. So I'm going to paste these notes down here. And these are actually based on the chords, not reading the notes. This is what I've actually gotten in through chord detection. There could be an error in there, so let's find out. Play it one more time. No, it seems okay. And obviously, Logic has made its own choices for where those notes are going to land for each of those chords, simply by default by pasting that chord progression into that MIDI track down there below, or MIDI region, I should say, down there below. Now, however, what we can do is we can mute that out, and now we can go to town. We can pop in a brand new track, like a session player drummer, right? Let's just pick a drummer here from the list. Let's try that again. Okay, let's go plus. We're going to hit, it's on drummer. We're going to click on that, add a drummer track. Okay, there's our drummer track right there. Great. Let's just slide that down. Now we're going to hit that plus one more time. And this time I'm going to go here and select bass player. Click on that. It's going to add a bass player, hopefully. Yeah, there it goes. Let's get rid of that little inspector window, editor window. Click plus one more time. This time we're going to select keyboard player. Click the box. All right, and then we'll close that edit to clear that out. And then we're going to, actually what I'll do is I'm going to just mute out this top part, the chord detection, because we don't need that anymore. We're going to probably mute out that one. We'll just end up with the, sorry about that. We'll just end up with the original loop and the keyboard session players. And I'm just going to take the defaults and see what it sounds like. So you're going to hear it the first time that I am right now. We'll see how it sounds out of the box. Let's just shrink that down. And it's a little bit longer than the original track, but that's okay. Let's just play it. All right, now that we've got those in place, let's mute out the chord track. Let's mute out the verifying track there that I had. We're just going to have the Blue Skies chords layers, the original loop. We've got our chord track above, and we got the session players down below. Let's play that and see how it sounds. Hopefully not too loud. All right, I wouldn't say it sounds great, but it's a start. It's definitely a start, and those chords are definitely chords that go along with the original track. Now, these can, be tweaked in all sorts of different ways. You can choose different drummers and bass players and keyboard players, even change the instruments out. But I think you get the idea. All right, so let's take a look at this template file that I created here. I'll include a link in the description, as I mentioned. And I'm going to basically show you the key items that have been configured on here. There's only a couple tracks that really are important. This chord detection track is important. Obviously, you need a place to put your loop. And then these other things are, there's sort of helper tracks, but they need to be configured a certain way. And this last track is just kind of for a final check to make sure you got the chords right. So let's go into the first into the editor here of the modules and take a look what we've got. So first of all, on this chord detection track, we've got electric piano loaded as an instrument. And no MIDI effects or anything like that. But let's take a look at the routing. if we go over here and look at this track right here, you'll see that I've got internal MIDI in set to 1 inst in. You'll notice that you have multiple choices here. There's off, MIDI to track, and instrument input. I've got the instrument input set to 1, which basically means that when I play anything on track number 1, that MIDI is going to come from what is in this track. So any kind of chord detection that's going to be done, it's going to be getting that chord detection from the vintage electric piano track, that MIDI region right here, and that's why that chord detection works. So that's that for that number 1 track, that chord detection. The other sections, these are all very similar. The chord trigger and the chord trigger minor, major, and manual, they're basically all configured very similar in terms of routing. Basically, the internal MIDI in, I've got it set up MIDI to track, and I've got it set up for the, in this case, the chord trigger effect, which I'll show you in a second. And so basically both of these are configured so that the MIDI going into this track is coming in from the chord trigger. So when you press a key and hit record, it's going to record from that chord trigger effect, which I'll show you here. Let me shrink that inspector down and go into the editor. So if you look over here, I'm currently on track number 3. You see I've got an audio effect loaded, that chord trigger which you saw earlier. And what it's got is, if you press and hold on it, you get this record to MIDI track here, which will ensure that the MIDI that's going to be recorded in that track is coming from the chord trigger, not just from the keyboard. If we recorded without this setting and without that routing, and you just pressed a single note, it would just record a single note in that track. So that's the key to that and the other chord trigger. And the manual record, now that one is pretty much a standard MIDI track. There's nothing special about it. When you record your notes, they're just going to go into that MIDI track. No special settings on there, really. It's just a standard MIDI track that you would record from the Surface keyboard, the Surface instrument like default. And that's pretty standard. Same thing for the MIDI check down here. It's just a standard MIDI track with input from the keyboard. So nothing special there. And that's really all the settings that you need to worry about here. And that's pretty much everything I need to cover. So with that, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and thanks for watching. Take care.